Good evening, everyone. This is the Pillar One Advisory Committee to the AIB. And the, today we will be discussing collaborative pathways, insights from the pre-K mixed delivery and early childhood education work groups. We're joined by a couple of guests here. We have from Baltimore City, we have Rudy Zellman. And from Montgomery, we have Sharon Friedman and Joanne Hurt. And we are also joined by Christina Bush. And today we have Rachel Heiss here as well. So it's a special meeting, and Lisa Armstrong and Arcia. So it's going to be a good meeting. I have my committee here, and we're going to start with introduction. My name is Ruby Daniels, and I am the chair of the Pillar One Advisory Committee, along with my vice chair, Dr. Ray, who's going to introduce herself next.
Dr. Rainier Miller, Prince George's and Charles County, the Consortium of Accomplished Educators. Should I pass it?
Yes, please.
All right. Well, Gina, you're next to me.
Hi, everyone. I am Gina Hoover. I am a member of the Pillar One Advisory Committee, and I am an early learning lead teacher in Washington County Public Schools. And I'll pass it to Sakshi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sakshi. I'm a junior at Long Range High School, and I'm in Howard County. And I will pass it to Dr. Jennifer.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Mata McMahon. I'm an associate professor of early childhood education at UMBC, and I'm a member of the advisory committee for Pillar One. I'll pass it to Sharon.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sharon Friedman from Montgomery County, and I work with an initiative that's called Montgomery Moving Forward, and we're working with a statewide group to try to address elevating the early care and education workforce profession. And I'll pass it to Joanne Hurt.
Hi, my name is Joanne Hurt, and I'm the Executive Director of Wonders Early Learning and Extended Day. And I'm a member of the Montgomery Moving Forward Leadership Group, and I've been working on the Issues Committee, which Sharon mentioned is working on elevating the ECE workforce. I think of it as like supporting the ECE workforce too. And I will pass it on to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Really pleased to be here with you tonight. Rachel Heiss, Executive Director of the Accountability and Implementation Board. And actually, we've been participating in this work group in Montgomery County as well. So I'm really happy to have you be sharing more about that work. I will pass it to actually Jennifer. Sorry, you just, but Dr. Lynch, we're doing introductions.
Oh, hello. Well, I am Jennifer Lynch. I am an AIB board member. I also serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Education and Engagement for the University System of Maryland.
Oh.
I don't know if we're popcorning around, but I don't know who's gone or who's not. So if anybody wants to like take a leap.
Arcia and Joy from AIB.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arcia Sethi Snowden, and I am the Outreach and Communications Director at AIB. I'll pass it to Joy.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
See me? Okay. My computer says no, but I guess I will take your word for it. Hi, everybody. I'm Joy Schaefer. I am the new Government Relations Director at AIB, and I'm happy to join you this evening.
Lisa, did you want to introduce? And Chris, I see Christina, you go ahead first.
That's okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Here I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Armstrong, Policy Analyst for the AIB. I am focused on Pillar 4 and Pillar 1.
Great. And I'm Chris Push, Executive Director of the Maryland State Child Care Association, co-chair of the Office of Child Care Advisory Council, and State Early Child Advisory Council member. Thanks for having me.
Last but not the least, we have Rudy.
Hello, nice to be with you all today. Rudy Zellman. I work at the Fund for Educational Excellence in Baltimore City as Program Director, Pre-K Expansion.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to start the meeting with the updates from the AIB. And Rachel or Lisa?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Ruby. Thank you, everyone, for lending your time for today's meeting. We have a few updates from the AIB. As you will see, our new AIB team member, Joy, she gave a brief introduction, but I want to tell you that we successfully hired Joy, and she is now our Government Relations Director. And she works very closely with our executive director, Rachel, and the board of directors. And she has already hit the ground running as the General Assembly session continues. And she has stepped in and already provided much needed assistance to our team for all things legislation.
Lisa, if I could just add
Yes.
to that, some of you may know Joy. Joy actually served on the Kerwin Commission. So she was involved in the development of the policies that led to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So she also hits the ground running in a real deep understanding of the blueprint. So we're just really happy to have been able to snag her.
That's good that the AIB team is growing.
Yes.
And with experts.
Yes. And in keeping with hiring, we have some other hiring announcements. We will be recruiting and hiring very soon for a policy analyst for Pillar 1, which is early childhood education, and a policy analyst for Pillar 5, which is accountability and governance. If you had a chance to watch the last board meeting, you will have known that our board members approved 3 more LEA plans. And that was Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, and Prince George's County. And then those of the committee members that are here, they see many more squares on their screen tonight because we are lucky enough to have some fellow members of the AIB join us. So first we have our board liaison member, Lynch. She said hello minutes ago. We have Arshia, who is our outreach and communications director. And then we have Joy, who is our government relations director. And then finally, we have Rachel Heiss, our executive director, who is also fresh out of the budget meeting at the Maryland General Assembly and made time to join us for today's meeting. And those are the updates for the AIB.
Hey, thank you. The other topic that I want to bring up, I'm sure, would be the summary of the joint policy blueprint for the pre-K implementation. Do you want us to talk about that now or after the guest speakers speak?
We can do it whatever order you prefer.
Well, whatever. What does the committee think? Shall we address it now or wait until the end?
I say just go ahead and do it now. What do you think?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. So last week, the AIB actually had 2 meetings. One was our separate board meeting on Thursday, but on Tuesday, we met jointly with the State Board of Education. And part of the agenda was discussion and adoption of a joint policy on pre-K. And I put in the chat the final version of that, which includes which is the signed version, which is a little different than the original version because there was discussion and some amendments to the policy during the meeting. So I wanted to make sure you had the final version, and I'll go ahead and share my screen if that works. Are you able to see where it says the policy? Okay, great. So I just wanted to really, first of all, talk about the context for why the board, both boards felt like it was important to consider this policy and adopt it. And there's some in the background section, it really talks about some of the changes that were made to the pre-K policy in the law last session, which were really designed to try to make the mixed delivery system for publicly funded full day pre-K a viable system by accelerating the timeline for the phase-in of the per pupil funding. They also delayed the expansion to tier 2 students by a year so that there was more focus on the tier 1 4-year-olds for at least for one more year. And then of course, the sliding scale, which I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially what both boards really are focused on is expanding access to as many 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds as possible, as soon as possible, because it is such a key element of the blueprint to have this full, high quality, full day pre-kindergarten system. And the mixed delivery system is key to that because the school systems are not able to serve all of the students. They don't have, they don't have the space for one thing, but also, as we all know, having meeting the high quality staffing standards is also something that everyone's working towards. And that was also some of the changes that were made last session to try to provide more pathways for meeting the high quality staffing requirement. So this policy is really all about sort of trying to focus on expanding pre-K as quickly as possible. And in that context, the intent of the policy is really to essentially focus the LEAs on serving tier 1 4-year-olds, and not just and not that they themselves are serving them all, but to the extent that they're not able to serve them all in their school systems, which we know many of them don't have that capacity, that they would be working with the private providers to serve the tier 1 4-year-olds. So, but as we move from this current year where only tier 1 4-year-olds are eligible to receive the funding into next year, and as we phase in the sliding scale, the boards really wanted to make sure that the LEAs are focused on ensuring tier 1 4-year-olds are being served, that the private providers are very focused on serving essentially all the other 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds, as well as, of course, in the number 3 there, it's very clear that private providers can still serve tier 1 4-year-olds, and we would like that to expand. But as you know, there's only about 1,600 private provider slots right now. So for the tier 1 4-year-olds, so it's a very small component of the 25,000 full 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds that are enrolled in full day pre-K. But to really, as we're expanding into tier 1 3-year-olds and tier 2 and 3 4-year-olds, to really encourage private providers to participate in that. And then the last item in number 3 is specifically talks about providers that serve the tier 2 and 3 4-year-olds have the option of collecting the family share or not collecting the family share. And that is something that is an option that is in the statute. So that is, the policy sort of calls that out, but it actually is really just stating what the law says, which is that providers have the option to collect the family share or not collect the family share. And some, particularly with the LEAs, I think some have already indicated that, they may not collect it, and others plan to collect it. So this is sort of a, not a one size fits all policy. It really is going to depend on the local context and the priorities. So that is just an overview of the joint policy, and I will take a pause and see if Dr. Lynch would like to add anything.
I think I am good. I'm happy to help answer any questions. I think there was ample discussion at the joint AIB MSDE board meeting, and so I don't want to be redundant for anybody who's watched it, but want to fill in any gaps that anybody needs.
Yeah, I mean, I know Chris has some questions too, but I have just a few questions about the, first I got confused about the prioritizing of the the tier 1 students, the 4-year-old. Would we still consider the parent choice if the family choose to have like a smaller group size and wanted the private providers as opposed to the public providers? If it's a priority.
For if the family choice is a priority, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, I think LEAs, family choice is absolutely a component of the mixed delivery system. How it's implemented does vary, I think, across the state by LEAs in terms of how they are taking in the parent requests for enrollment. And I think in many of the LEAs, if the parent expresses an interest in a private provider, then they provide them with who is participating, who has space that is participating and eligible. I think as we're moving into the implementation, MSDE is going to be taking more of a role in the private provider enrollment and obviously the payments, so that I think that coordination between the LEAs, MSDE, and the private providers is going to be really critical in making sure that parents do have that choice.
Now, with the sliding scale, how will that look like?
Right. So I'm going to stop sharing this document and let me share the other document. So the sliding scale is something that the State Department of Education was required to develop, and they did develop a sliding scale last year and adopted one, but then with the legislation which delayed the implementation of the sliding scale this year, they actually at their board meeting on the 28th, the two boards met jointly in the morning, and then in the afternoon, MSDE met separately. And in that separate meeting, they adopted a revised sliding scale. And you can see here that it is based on tiers, which is similar to they simplified it. Let me go back a slide here because they have. So they simplified the sliding scale from what was adopted last year into fewer categories to make it easier to administer. They are still capping the family share at 7% of the family's income. That is a per child calculation, but that 7% is still part of the calculation. But then they base, instead of the many, this is just the 3 tiers, just to make sure we all know what we're talking about. I think you all do, but possibly others out watching the meeting. Tier 1 are the children, 3 and 4-year-olds from families with household income up to 300% of the federal poverty level. Tier 2 and 3 only apply to 4-year-olds, not 3-year-olds. And tier 2 are the 4-year-olds from families with an income between 300% of the federal poverty level and up to 600% of the federal poverty level. And then the tier 3 families are have an income above 600% of the federal poverty level. The current, I'm going to skip the current scale, but the new sliding scale that they adopted last week, as I said, it was simplified. It took into account the increase per pupil rate that the legislature adopted last year, as well as feedback from stakeholders, including private providers. And so if you, I'm going to go to this. So this is the proposed sliding scale for fiscal 26, which is the upcoming school year. So the next school year for 25-26. And with the changes that the legislature made last year, for tier 2 4-year-olds, it is being phased in over 2 years. So in the first year, fiscal 26, children with families with household income between the 301 and 360% of federal poverty are eligible to enroll, and private and public providers would receive state funding for those students. And then you can see what the estimated family share would be for students in this range. And it is based, you can see some of the notes. So it's based on a family of 4, and it's based on 10 monthly payments. So it would be about $145 a month per child. So any tier 2 4-year-olds that are served in the upcoming school year, that this would be an estimate of the rate. It will vary depending on the size of the family, but otherwise that would be the rate. So that's for the coming year. So pretty simple in terms of the calculation. And then they also have a proposed sliding scale for fiscal 27, which is when the whole tier 2 up to 600% of federal poverty level applies. And so you can see that they have an average amount family share per child, and then the monthly estimate, again, using the same assumptions about family size. And so you can see what the scale would be. But this scale wouldn't apply next year. It would apply in 2 years.
The following year.
Right.
So, yeah, with this calculation, then it's easy for us to understand. So we would know the exact copay if we need to collect, right? Or if we choose to collect, if you choose to collect.
Or right, if you choose to collect.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any question?
Well, I have a question related to the joint statement and the role that you play, Ruby, in Pillar One, I was reached out to ask if you had, I guess, do you vote on these things, or who decides about the statement if you were not even aware that these recommendations were made and you yourself had concerns related to them. So I guess what is the process related to engaging, the community? Because as I sit on the Office of Child Care Advisory Council, I sit on the State Early Child Advisory Council. I work with and Rudy that's on here, and I work with other funders in Montgomery County, and had 175 seats. None of us were asked about whether or not if you've engaged stakeholders in the recommendations, because I believe that they threaten the childcare system. I don't know where the data is coming from related to what will happen to our businesses if we only can get some of the fours. You can't cherry pick the fours out of our programs because we can't stay open. So I'm very concerned about the impact that this will have. And also with the sliding scale, if I don't know the point of the sliding scale if you can choose not to use it. So it really pits the private providers against public schools, because who can compete with free? So I have concerns, and I guess, I'd like to have more, engagement. And I believe that the way that this reads to me, and I appreciate Joe Manco's work during the state board meeting to make those recommendations and the changes. I think that was necessary to be sure that the private providers can participate in Tier 1. But it seems that you're recommending the LEAs and the public schools over the private providers. Again, we have most of these children, and the fact that the Child Care Scholarship Program is about to go on pause based on, our huge deficit, and we're working hard in legislative session to find more money. But at the same time, we won't be able to braid funding as these children come into our programs because it pauses in May. So again, with House Bill 1441, which I was very instrumental in working on that, it was able to basically allow the LEAs, and the reports to be at a 90-10 minimum split. So that was, we thought, a better option, as well as Rachel said, expediting the fees. So I am concerned about the way that this reads, and I'm concerned that it will have a bigger impact than you realize on the childcare community, which is already, if you read the comptroller's recent report on the state of the economy, we've lost over 12,000 seats and over 1,200 childcare providers. This isn't, something that we should be looking at lightly. It should be much more thoughtful, and I have grave concerns about it.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know the question that you have for the AIBs, the process, right? Whether we would be included in the future recommendation of,
or even you as Ruby as an AIB member, because you didn't even see the document. So my question is, well, how does this work? Because it's the perspective from the outside is you didn't get the final somebody on the AIB that is part of Pillar 1 to agree with these recommendations.
The problem was I was on vacation for quite some time in January, so I'm not even sure when the meeting occurred.
So if I guess I would like a couple points of clarification, and I'm sure Rachel will hop in here. So I think just for clarity's standpoint, the board members who vote are Senate appointed board members. They're, that vote on that based on recommendations that come from the executive director and her team. Same happens on the MSDE board side. And, part of the real value of the advisory committee is to provide this feedback. A lot of the feedback that you've provided is feedback that was provided in the initial crafting of the legislation that happened now sort of many, many, many years ago. And so that is, that feedback has been consistent. We've certainly continued to hear real concerns about the impact on private providers. It's something I know our board members have held, very close as we're thinking. And so we have to strike that balance. And at the same time, we have to ensure that the legislation is fulfilled and that the intent of the legislation is fulfilled, and striking that balance with other considerations around budget and how do we remain viable? How do we continue to have pre-K be a part of this, legislation at all, I think is something, we have to make sure that we're striking a very delicate balance, so that we don't end up walking away from all, sort of walking ourselves into a place where we have no supports at all. But I think I hear those concerns. And I think that the balance to strike it was really to allow our private providers that space, sort of more substantially with younger students through 3, and then allow the 4-year-old students in that early transition process into K through 12. But I'm gonna kick it over to Rachel, because that is my understanding, and she will tell me I am wrong in some way.
No, not at all. I would just say I think I hear you, Chris, and I think we need to think about how we can get feedback. It's a tricky, as Dr. Lynn said, it's a tricky balance between getting feedback on before the board considers voting on something. So I think we just need to try to think that through a little more and see how we can. Sometimes the timeline is challenging for that as well. And in this case with the holidays, and then as Ruby said, she was home for a while, but we do value this feedback, and that's why we're here. We wanted to share, the intent and make sure that that the words of the policy and the intent are aligned. And so I just want to, when you take the whole policy together, it says private providers may serve all tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it says. That private providers may serve all of the students. And as I said, we need you serving all of the students. And we're really trying to encourage the LEAs to focus on the tier 1 4-year-olds. And but there are many of them that still need to be served. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think your bigger concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the family share and the option of collecting that. And that is in the statute. So that is something that the AIB and the state board cannot change by policy. So that is something that, and we have been consulting with our counsel about this over many months. And ultimately the conclusion was that is what the law says. And so I think for that issue, it would require a legislative change.
I would concur. And I agree with you, Rachel. I think that we actually took the recommendations of the AIB because you are listening, and we used those recommendations from last December of 2023 to build out House Bill 1441.
Yep.
And so I will tell you, I truly believe that is your intent, but it causes me pause to see when you make recommendations that I believe is counterproductive and that could hurt the people you need to provide mixed delivery. When you have a freeze coming up, and these are the children that are tier 1, These are the families that are exactly about the same amount of money that we are going to not be able to take as well. We cannot survive without 3s and 4s. It doesn't work that way. The business model is not sustainable. So I am very concerned about the sliding scale. And I would really hope that the AIB, with the research that you've done, would make recommendations, because we try to follow your lead as well, that it needs to be statewide. Either you do or you don't, because you are really pitting everyone against each other. We need the money. We don't have the same resources, but whose parents, need free too. I mean, so if this is public school, I understand the dilemma, and I understand how the LEAs feel as well. They don't collect money typically, but if we're in this together, this needs to be a true mixed delivery system, and there are still barriers, and this is definitely one of them. And these recommendations seem to come from a place that favors the LEAs, and it could hurt without having more research in that area.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rachel and Jennifer. So, since we are getting short of time, so we
yes.
just go and go to our guest speakers. And the first one on my list is Rudy Selman from Baltimore City.
Again, Rudy Selman. I work at the Fund for Educational Excellence in Baltimore City as the Program Director of Pre-K Expansion. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you all today. I really am happy to be here with you all. So I'm pleased to be able to share a bit about the work that's been happening in Baltimore City. Ruby specifically asked me to talk about the mixed delivery work group that we have, so I'm excited to share more about that with you today. So in Baltimore City, we've established a mixed delivery work group through our Early Childhood Advisory Council. The ECAC recognized how much of an impact the blueprint and mixed delivery work was going to have on the early care and education landscape, and they created a special separate work group just focused on mixed delivery. That work group kicked off in the spring of 2023 and really got going in the fall of 2023. The work group acts as a convening body, and it's been very effective in creating a table that brings together the key stakeholders as we all grapple with the different components of mixed delivery and what that will look like in Baltimore City. The work group meets monthly. It's made up of representatives from private childcare providers, Head Start, city government, the local philanthropic community, childcare advocates, researchers, and Baltimore City Public Schools. We're also very fortunate to have a national expert serving as the facilitator of our group, which has been a tremendous resource. The first year of the work group was really focused on learning and information sharing, making sure that everybody's speaking the same language, understanding the nuances of the blueprint. And mixed delivery is really complicated, as you all know, and there's changes that are constantly happening. A lot of the time, we're coming up with more questions than answers. Our ECAC is undergoing a strategic refresh, and the work group has also been spending our last few sessions really trying to hone in on where our group wants to focus its future work. The group has heard consistent challenges in implementing mixed delivery in Baltimore City, specifically around access for private providers. So I want to be sure to share those with this committee today. I'm sure they're probably not challenges you haven't heard before. The first being the application itself. It's very difficult for a community-based provider to have the time and administrative capacity to complete the application. The reimbursement aspect of the grant is another big challenge, even with the 15% upfront. We know that programs are already operating on a very tight margin, and this structural component of the grant is a big hurdle. The timing of the grant is another challenge. It doesn't align with typical planning and enrollment cycles. Programs are finding out if they're awarded slots in June or July, but enrollment usually begins months prior to that. This also makes it more difficult for city schools to collaborate with private providers on enrollment. We're making progress there, but the timing misalignment is a significant challenge. Providers having to navigate several different systems in regards to EXCELS and accreditation is another challenge. Aligning those requirements and systems would be really helpful in reducing the administrative burden it places on providers to navigate that component. And EXCELS itself is a big barrier to participation for providers. Only in Baltimore City, just a little over a third of community-based providers are currently even eligible to apply for the Pre-K Expansion Grant based on their EXCELS rating. And then when we zoom into areas of the city that have a high need for more pre-K seats, that problem becomes even more prevalent. So clearly, there are a lot of challenges to pre-K expansion and making public pre-K more accessible to the private providers who we really need to participate. I do want to lift up one great example of the type of collaboration that has come out of our work group and is a direct result of bringing stakeholders together at a diverse table. Last spring, several members of the working group collaborated to launch a pilot program. Want to recognize Chris from MSCCA, who was part of this as well, where they recruited private providers to apply for the pre-K expansion grant, provided them with the necessary supports to help them be successful, including grant writing and grant management for the first year of implementation. That was very successful. All 4 of the programs who were supported in that were awarded the grant, which resulted in around 90 additional private provider pre-K seats in Baltimore City. I know some of that work has also been happening in Montgomery County. This year, we're building off of that. We're hoping to support 10 programs through the application process and hopefully through the first year of implementation. We're also planning to add even more support for those programs in the first year of the grant, including coaching around Excels and accreditation, with the goal of building sustainability and capacity for programs who decide to participate in public pre-K. Again, these targeted supports are just one example of the work that's come out of this collaborative space. The expansion of pre-K through a mixed delivery system is only going to be successful if we're bringing all the stakeholders into the process. So our mixed delivery work group is certainly not a magic solution. Like I said, we're still defining exactly where we want to go as a work group and what our areas of focus will be, but it's been extremely helpful in creating a table where the most impacted stakeholders are able to open those lines of communications and have those really important implementation conversations together. I tried to keep that to 5 minutes. Again, thank you so much for your time. And then, of course, all the great work that you all are doing every day on this. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you so much. I know there's a House Bill 857 that's could address some of the issues that challenges or barriers that you brought.
I think it's Senator Henson's bill, 868, and I think
Okay.
It addresses almost all of what was in there. And there's also another bill, I believe, like a mixed delivery viability that might be coming out. So there's a lot of those that are going to be looked and advocated for the challenging aspects.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we're leaving Baltimore City and going to Montgomery County. Sharon and Joanne.
Hi, everybody. Sharon Friedman, and I'm going to let Joanne do most of the talking tonight because I have a sinus infection. But I did want to just take a moment to thank Rachel and Libby and Chris and Ruby, all of whom have been very active supporters of Montgomery Moving Forward's work at the state level. Montgomery Moving Forward is a cross-sector initiative in Montgomery County, but the work that we are taking on right now is applicable statewide. And we're looking to try to put forward a set of recommendations to support the early care and education workforce. And these recommendations didn't come about because 3 or 4 of us sat in a room and figured them out, but rather because we had hundreds and hundreds of proximity experts such as yourselves, cross-sector folks in other sectors, business and philanthropy and education and academia, and of course, nonprofits, that enabled us to come to a set of recommendations. And the 3 priority recommendations that Joanne will talk about that we're working on right now have to do with regulatory alignment and career ladder for birth to 5, not just pre-K, birth to 5, the establishment of an early care and education workforce registry, and then the forming of a statewide cross-sector task force that would help to elevate the early care and education profession. So I'm going to step back and Joanne will talk a little bit more about detail.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So the first recommendation, this alignment of within the regulatory sphere and the career ladder, is is something that we identified early on as sort of that first step that we need to tackle. And it sort of is reflected in some of the previous conversations about even what Rudy just said about Excels and accreditation and these different requirements. And, and so we want to make sure that not only do we conduct like a mapping of all these different requirements for qualifications for the ECE workforce, but that we align it with the common
unifying framework.
Yes, thank you. With the unifying framework and also the family child care accreditation. So having these sort of external guiding principles, so to speak, informing this work of making recommendations around changes in the current regulations and COMAR. And so that would be one of the pieces of this first recommendation. Sharon mentioned the career ladder. We feel really strongly that the career ladder needs to be birth to 5. Chris mentioned earlier about sort of pulling the 3s and 4s out of the ecosystem of early care and education. We really do believe that it's important to think of ECE as birth to 5. And therefore, this work that's happening with the career ladder as a result of the 1441 really should be comprehensive and speaking to the entire ECE workforce, because people can move, they should be able to move between age groups and classrooms. So that's the first recommendation. And then the second recommendation is around a data workforce registry. And that we feel is really going to be a helpful tool in a number of different ways, informing decision-making, but also a resource to the folks in the field or even people who are considering entering the field, so that it would, we've talked to several different people who have, with all of these recommendations, we've had lots of conversations beyond just the work group that we have right now. And we've leaned on the expertise of the various people that we've spoken to. And this registry concept, there are other states that have some pretty robust registries that we believe could be great models for us to look at as a state, and with an emphasis on being a resource for the folks in the field, because as you know, we're having a challenging time with finding enough educators to work in this sector. And so one of the things that, again, like a guiding principle in thinking about this, is that the registry needs to be housed in a place that contains content experts, so people who understand ECE, but then also data IT experts, so that the confidentiality is really a top priority. And it is because there are, and many of you at the state level probably know, there are these registries for other groups within the Department of Labor. And what we think would be beneficial for early childhood education in general is to be viewed as a really strong sector that's powering the economy in the state, and therefore is recognized and respected and funded in the ways that it should be. And then the third recommendation that Sharon mentioned is this statewide task force that we would ask the Governor's Workforce Development Board to partner with the Maryland Economic Council and the Office of Children, and include the Departments of Labor, Commerce, and Human Services, and the Maryland State Department of Education, the Higher Education Commission, and representatives from the General Assembly, statewide and even local, more centralized employers, the chambers of commerce, early care and education providers and advocates, and philanthropic organizations. And we see we are working on sort of identifying what we think would be important goals for this group, because and ways that this group could have some real I guess, lack of a better word, power to make sure that recommendations are implemented. And we know that there are lots of task force that get stood up in the state and also locally, and sometimes they, issue reports that just go on the shelves. And we want to make sure that this actually is a working group that is able to bring about systems change, because that's the goal of this collective impact work that MMF does is really around building systems and changing systems so that they're stronger and really supporting the needs of the community. Ruby, you're muted.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Chris, do you have anything? We have a few more minutes.
No, I think we have some bills around the registry as well, but I work with both of these lovely ladies that, all three of the lovely ladies just spoke, and very excited for the work that we're all collaborating on, including the AIB. So thank you for all that you do, Ruby.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank the AIB team and the guest speakers and my committee, for their time and expertise. So our next Pillar 1 Advisory Committee meeting is on March the 6th, and the start time is at 4:30, just as always. And if there's anything else, does the committee have anything?
Hi, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to, thinking about, what we were talking about just really quick with the, with the policy and the tiers and providing, pre-K to all of our students. Here in Washington County, we do have the fortune that we are universal at the moment, that we provide pre-K to tier 1, 2, and 3 in our LEA. And, we've worked really hard to kind of build that bridge with our private providers, because when we looked at our data, I think 8 years ago now, we kind of realized that all students needed education in pre-K, and so as many kids as we could educate as a county, it was beneficial. So we tried to work to get as many kids as we could in pre-K, and we also really work hard with our private providers to provide that with 3-year-olds. So, we've just been trying to, as much as we can, if somebody calls our office, we say, oh, and they're looking for 3-year-old pre-K, we automatically direct them right to our private providers. So I just kind of wanted to speak to the positive side of it a little bit too. Just, I understand that it is tough from the childcare side to, but we don't want it to, from the LEA side, like we don't want it to look, be it's one against the other or anything like that. In the end, all 4-year-olds, all 3-year-olds, as many kids as we can help and get educated, the better off that we all are in the long run, because we all know that from K to 12 looks a lot different than when we were all in school, and the exposure that they're gaining in pre-K, whether it's public or private, is just a benefit to all the kids. So just wanted to say that. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I know we have more kids than providers currently, so we really have to grow the slots. So anything else from the other committee members? If there's nothing else, we will give you back the 2 more minutes, or to everyone. So, I guess our next meeting is on the March 6th. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for a wonderful meeting, and we'll see you again in March 6th.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks so much. And if anybody wants to join our work statewide, we'd love to have you.
Thank you.